Hi everybody, welcome to a very late edition of IndyCar on Monday the 25th of March. And well, where do I begin today? I was reading a lot of different newspapers today, but one of the things that stood out for me today was Paul Kavanagh's column today, We Ginger Dog's column online, about a thing called majoritism. And majoritism is probably a term that you've never heard of. In fact, I hadn't really thought about it before today until I read it. But majoritism is that addiction to having votes on everything, where we either have 50% of more than 50% of the vote means that you get to do what that 51% of the population says we should do. Majoritism is not democracy, though. Imagine if you were just sort of deciding what you were going to have for your dinner, and you went around the 6 people at the table and you had a vote on who wanted fish and chips and who wanted a curry. And 4 people said they wanted fish and chips, right? And 2 people wanted a curry. Now, the 2 people who are being forced to eat the fish and chips may not want the fish and chips. The fish and chips might make them sick. Maybe they're allergic to fish. Maybe they can't tolerate the fat in the chips. But the point is, they're being forced to go along and eat fish and chips because these 4 other people said they had to. Now imagine that multiplied up by 50, 60 million, and you've got 17 million people out of 55 million people in England. 17 million vote to leave the European Union, right? And all of Scotland just about decides they don't want to leave the European Union. But because of majoritism, because 51.2% or whatever it was of England voted to leave the European Union, the rest of us have to go with them. It's a bit like a suicide pact, isn't it? It's like, well, say 51 people out of 100 decided to commit suicide and force the other 49 people to be killed with them. That's what we're talking about. That's what majoritism is. And yet it doesn't always work. Remember back in 1979 when there was a referendum on Scotland's Home Rule, in other words, what we've now got, which is the business of having our own parliament. And that was defeated even though we got more than 51% of the vote, because we couldn't have a majority because the turnout was too low. So the British government moves the goalposts so that their majoritism didn't work. But this is the business of majoritism. It's this balancing act between one mass of people and another. But is it a good way to leave an entire block of nations and basically wrench yourself out of a massive trading bloc where you've got billions of pounds worth of export orders riding on it? Is it a good way to decide something like that? Giving that vote to all of those people and not giving them the information about how badly damaging it would be to the economy and how it's going to ruin the lives of everyone concerned. And yet, because they voted, whatever it was, 52% to 48%, that we were going to do it, the other 48% of the United Kingdom is forced to go along with the damage and forced to endure what is about to become one of the biggest peacetime catastrophes in British history. Ian Blackford today, the SNP leader in Westminster, was interviewed by somebody. I was trying to remember who it was. It was probably on Channel 4, but I don't know. And he was interviewed, and he was asked about how bad a no-deal Brexit was going to be. And Ian Blackford said that he had been advised by Privy Council, which I'm assuming he's a member of, being the leader of a party at Westminster, that the whole business of the no-deal Brexit was going to be devastating to the country. And actually, Ian Blackford looked really quite shaken by whatever it was he'd heard at the Privy Council meeting. Now, the Privy Council, for those of you who are not sure what that means, is it's not a group of people meeting in a public toilet, although you might think that. It is, in fact, the secret meeting of what used to be the Queen's personal advisors. The Privy Council were the group of the nation's leaders and nobles who would advise the monarch. It's now turned into a group of high-ranking or top officials from the major political parties who are sworn to secrecy, but are given access to private information that the rest of us are not allowed to know because it's too secret, or it'd be too devastating for us to know. But for Ian Black to come out looking visibly shaken by it, it must have been pretty bloody awful. Now, that tells you something else about this process of Brexit, and it also tells you a lot about why the European Union has been making it known in every newspaper and every news source today that they are moving very swiftly to a no-deal Brexit footing, and they have upped their game in their preparations in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, to prepare for a no-deal Brexit. Everything short of actually putting up, physical barriers across the island, they are already doing. They are saying that there will need to be border checks. It's almost inevitable, but they're going to do everything they can to avoid putting up any physical infrastructure. Now, if the European Union is ramping up its preparations for a no-deal Brexit, and across Europe their major preparations for a no-deal Brexit have been put into action, and the British government has opened up its war room in the basement in Whitehall, where they have all their military advisors getting ready to mobilise their 3,500 part-time toy soldiers to, well, basically drive 3,500 trucks around the UK delivering whatever stuff they can't get. You know there's something wrong. You know there's something dire about to happen. But also we know that Mrs May has said that she does not yet have enough support to bring her deal back to the Houses of Parliament to be voted on. We know also that the Democratic Unionist Party, when Mrs May said that she was thinking about having another meaningful vote tomorrow, said no way, the DUP is not going to vote for it, and so that was pretty much demolished almost immediately. So now we're in a situation where nobody wants Mrs May's deal, nobody will commit to it. Mrs May says that she's not going to put it up for discussion because nobody wants it. And basically the Tory party, the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, everybody who has anything to say on Brexit is coming up with amendments and what they call indicative votes. Now, whatever the hell that is. Indicative votes is basically sticking your toe in the water to see if an idea that you've got might be better than Mrs May's. And what they're doing is having a wee vote in the Houses of Commons to see what it is that the other politicians in there might actually coalesce behind or around. And so far, nothing has stuck. I've read a lot of these amendments, and if you take the time and the trouble to go and read them, if you can even understand what they mean in the first place, you'll realise very quickly that they are almost meaningless. And it is basically a box-ticking exercise. It looks like they're going through the motions of preparing to look as if they are fighting to find some new kind of deal that people can vote on. Personally, having looked at these amendments, this is a bit like the captain of the Titanic deciding that instead of a four-piece band playing on the deck as the ship sinks below the icy waters, they're instead going to have a full orchestra, and they're going to play Abide With Me, followed by Rule Britannia, and that the life jackets they're all going to wear will be, blue for the boys and pink for the girls. But the ship is still going to sink, and all the Scots people locked in steerage are still going to sink with it, regardless. That is what this is the equivalent of. They are not just moving the deck chairs on the Titanic, they're changing the sheet music, they're hoisting a new flag up the mast, they're repainting the bridge, they're doing everything except actually stopping the ship hit the iceberg. And the reason I think for this is that the Labour Party wants it to go ahead. Jeremy Corbyn wants Brexit to happen. He wants Theresa May to take the blame for it so that he can get the keys to number 10. The Tories want it because they've always wanted it. This seems to have been their goal all along, was to go for a no-deal Brexit and to punish the people who voted for Brexit by showing them how impossible it is to square the circle of Brexit. To have a Brexit which produces jobs is impossible. It's a bit like having a disease which is good for people. It just can't work. And so it is impossible. But it seems to be that the whole thing has been set up so that it fails badly, we leave without a deal. Mrs May takes the fall for it. She's the one single person in the whole of the country that will take the blame. She is going to be the whipping boy for Brexit when it happens, and she's going to be the whipping girl for a no-deal Brexit when it happens. So they can take all of the blame that they have got, and this is the Tory party's entire culpability, and funnel it all into Mrs May so that she is vilified and hated forevermore in the history books. In exchange for that, Mrs May will be paid probably millions of pounds. She'll be set up for life. They'll probably buy her a nice new home in the Seychelles somewhere, and she and her husband will be able to retire in bliss and happiness and completely forget about everything that's happened with Brexit. In the meantime, the rest of us are going to have to deal with all the crap that we'll be swimming around in because of it. So it's not going to be a Brexit for jobs, as Jeremy Corbyn idiotically said the other day. It can't be. Brexit doesn't produce jobs. Brexit destroys jobs. It's possible that in about 25 years' time, the British might have managed to have been shocked into actually getting themselves some export industries going again and be able to rebuild their economy a bit. But Scotland is the one that's going to take the most immediate hit. It's our export industries that will be decimated by this. It's our jobs that will be destroyed by this. The value of the pound is going to plummet. Food prices are going to skyrocket. People are going to starve. There's not going to be the medicines we need for people who rely on regular life-saving or life-extending medications. All of that is going to suffer. And all because somebody said, wouldn't it be a nice idea for us all just to leave the European Union and set up by ourselves and everything will be fine? Farage had 200 people joined his march for Brexit. The rest of us had 1 million and plus people in London over the weekend saying, no, we don't want this Brexit. Nobody wants this Brexit. It's like the bloody emperor's new clothes. Everybody can see it's crap. It's a lie. It's a tissue of lies. And yet nobody in Westminster wants to be the first one to say it. So I'll say it. Brexit is crap. Brexit was a bunch of lies put about by people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, guys like Michael Gove and David Davis. Now it's interesting, I think, that one of the first groups of people that Theresa May spoke to last night and this morning were Jacob Rees-Mogg, David Davis and Michael Gove, the architects of this hard no-deal Brexit, the ones who really want it to go wrong and want us to bomb out completely. Those are the people she spoke to first. Now why? Why was she speaking to them? She shouldn't be speaking to them at all. They're the ones who are going to try and ruin the country. The ones she should have been speaking to are the ones who are trying to save the country, to save the nation, to save its economy and save its jobs, but she's not speaking to them. The DUP has washed its hands of her as well, which I think is absolutely incredible. That the DUP, which basically helped to create this fundamental cluster disaster. I'm not going to use naughty words on the TV today, but you know what I'm saying. The DUP helped to set this up. Jacob Rees-Mogg set it up. David Davis teed it up. Michael Gove. They're all behind it. Boris Johnson was there this morning as well. Mrs May talking to him. Why is she talking to him? Why is she even giving them any oxygen at all or any publicity? I believe, and I think a lot of us have believed for a long time, but I now think that suspicions were correct, that no deal is where we're going. No deal is the ultimate destination of Brexit. It's been planned this way all along, and what we've seen has been a very elaborate, long-running 3-year drama, which is played out on the television to give us the illusion that we've had any kind of control over this, or that our politicians have made any efforts at all to stop it, when it's very clear to me that both the Labour Party and the Tory Party both want Brexit to happen on any terms, and it doesn't really matter which one it is. They're happy to let the country go to the dogs as long as it serves their interests. The Labour Party's interest, Jeremy Corbyn's interest, Theresa May's interest, Boris Johnson's interest, not ours. It's nothing to do with the people of the United Kingdom. It's nothing to do with the people of Scotland. It's all to do with political power and influence, and zero, sorry, Richie knows, zero to do with the rest of us. So what do? Well, we just have to wait and watch as we hit the iceberg, and as the toffs float off in the lifeboats with all the money and the wealth. Well, we are trapped in steerage behind chained gates, waiting to go down with the ship into the icy cold waters, because we are the ones being thrown not under the bus but under the sea in this particular sinking ship saga. We're not going to survive it. And I think it's, what can I say? I mean, it's not even about independence anymore, because if you think about this, after Brexit, there's no reason why we can't have independence. They can't exactly say, well, if you leave the UK, you'll not get back into you'll not be in the EU, you'll have to rejoin. We're already going to be out the EU, so that argument ain't going to wash anymore. All the more reason, I think, for people to start looking at voting for independence, because it is going to happen. And Nicola Sturgeon has said almost as much. She said just about everything except when it's going to happen. She said it's inevitable now that we will have an independence referendum, because it will be the only way to salvage anything from this. But we're being forced to wait until our heads are just below the surface of the water before we're allowed to vote. I said at the beginning of this that we are suffering, as Paul Kavanagh so perfectly put it, from majoritism, from this business of everything being done via black and white, good or bad, yes or no, in or out, leave or remain, binary choices, where half the population don't want something and just slightly more than half do want it. And that slightly more than half have been persuaded by a bunch of liars and cheats, corrupt officials who are just lining their own pockets by betting against the United Kingdom, or betting on Brexit happening. That's really what's at the root of all of this. And looking ahead at the future after Brexit, what do you see? You see a country where Scotland's economy is down the toilet, basically, and they don't care in London, because they've got their tax haven empire free and clear from the European Union, able to operate at will, to hide money from any crook, any despot on the planet, on any number of our secret islands where they can stash away all that criminal dark money and make a fortune out of it. In the meantime, the rest of us are going to be scrabbling around for bits and pieces of food left over in bins, be going to food banks. People who are desperately needing medication will just simply die for lack of it, because they're not going to care enough to provide it for you. This is the future of Britain under the Tories. It's a return to sort of a Dickensian view of the United Kingdom, a Dickensian view of Great Britain, rule Britannia. I'd be surprised actually if they didn't rename one of the duchesses Victoria, so that she can be Queen Victoria one day. I mean, it's got that bad. I mean, Charles Dickens, if he were to come back to life today and see what's being planned, would be appalled. And all the progress that was made in the last 150 years or so suddenly being thrown away for no reason other than to make a few rich Tories even richer than they are now. But looking at things, sort of from the other end of the country here in Scotland, I see a lot of reason to hope, because I know that most people in Scotland now are really awake. They can see what's happening. Even people who were never convinced by independence before, and who voted no and knew they were going to vote no years before there was a referendum on independence, who are very, very firm in their belief that staying in the United Kingdom made us stronger and safer and more secure than ever. And now that has all been stood on its head. Now black is white, good is bad, up is down. Nothing is what it was anymore. And since Brexit happened, since that notorious, that terrible day in 2016, when we came downstairs and discovered that just 2% of the electorate. That's all it was. Just 2% of a swing was enough to ruin the lives of half of the people, at least half of the people who live on these islands. Just 2% of the voters were swung by people like Rees-Mogg and Gove. And guess who's going to be in charge of the country when Theresa May leaves? Because she won't hang around after this. When this entire POCL collapses around them and the whole thing erupts into civil unrest and they can't contain it, May will be long gone, and who will be in charge but somebody like Boris Johnson or Michael Gove, or God help us, Jacob Rees-Mogg, little Lord Fauntleroy with his bloody monocle. Britain is a laughingstock already because of these guys. I personally don't want to live in the country that is the butt of everybody else's jokes in the rest of the world, because that's what we're about to become. We're already that. We're already the butt of everybody's jokes. Nobody can understand this. I don't think anybody on the planet understands why this is happening. And we can't tell them why it's happening because there isn't really a reason for it. It was a stupid, daft bit of... Well, basically, just a stupid, daft bit of British politicking. We're stuck with these binary choices, in, out, leave or remain. We don't get anything in between. There's no building a consensus. There's no, well, let's all think very hard about what we might like a relationship with Europe to be, and we'll come up with a better version of it, rather than staying in the EU, we'll propose something more positive. No, they didn't do that. They just said, do you want to leave the EU or stay in it? The EU is an evil empire, we must leave it. And so 2% of the population were fooled by it, and out we go, and everybody has to go with them. But it really is daft. It's a mass suicide where, 52% of the British voters are taking the other 48 down with them. It's daft. It's daft as anything I have ever seen. Probably the worst, stupid, crazy thing that the British empire, the British government has ever done in its entire existence. But, as I say, the good thing about it is that it will break the United Kingdom up. And good riddance, I say, because it's about time it was broken up. When you think about what Scotland could be, and how successful it would be, and how fantabulously, unimaginably wealthy this country would be without British politicians in London burning through all our money, burning through all our gas, burning through all our oil, wasting all of our resources, paying off debts that they have run up, when we are working our asses off trying to survive and make a living up here. It's ridiculous. It really is quite embarrassing. And personally, when it comes to the cringe, as we call it in Scotland, this has got to be the mother and father of every cringe. It couldn't be any more cringe-worthy than this. This is the biggest embarrassment that the UK has ever forced on Scotland. It's time, it really is time for Nicola to say, that's it. After this week, we're away. We're having our vote. We don't care whether you give us a Section 30 or not. It really doesn't matter anymore. The only way to save Scottish jobs is the bailout of this wretched, pathetic mess that you call a United Kingdom, and leave you with the DUP, leave you with Jacob Rees-Mogg and his jolly posh chums to run a country into the ground until there's nothing left of it. Frankly, it's got to this stage now where I expect mobs of people to take to the streets of London with pitchforks and burning torches. It's really that bad. And when the government is actually planning to put soldiers on the streets and prepare them for unarmed, non-lethal combat, which is what I've been hearing about a bit today, you have to worry really about the state that things are going to get into. The European Union's preparing for this no-deal Brexit. Britain's preparing military forces for the no-deal Brexit. They ain't going to spend money doing that if they don't really think it's going to happen. If they thought no-deal Brexit was never going to happen in a month of Sundays, you wouldn't see any of these preparations being made. I think anybody who now thinks that Brexit is going to be called off is sadly mistaken, because Mrs May has made sure that there are no other options available now. There's either no deal Brexit or no Brexit at all. And you can bet your bottom dollar that the Tories are going to plump for no deal Brexit, because they have already said that no deal is preferable to a bad deal. That was their stated policy at the very beginning of this, when they announced the Brexit vote, and when they signed Article 50, they said at the very outset that a bad Brexit was not going to be allowed to happen. They were not going to accept a bad deal. And Mrs May's brought them back the worst possible deal. So they're never going to accept it. Anyway, I've had my rant. I'm going home for my tea now. I would suggest the rest of us just get the popcorn out and we'll see what happens this week. I think the British nationalists are basically on their sinking ship now. We just have to abandon it, really, because Scotland has the keys to the only working lifeboat, and it's a working lifeboat that's full of fuel, it's full of energy, and it has all the wealth in it. Basically, all of the gold, the bullion, and all the rest of the goodies that Scotland owns are all in that lifeboat, and all we have to do is set sail from this Brexitania catastrophe that is about to happen and head back to Europe. We'll stay in Europe until we figure out a better way to relate to the European Union. But for the moment, I'd be quite happy to stay in the European Union while they think about it, and while we get our country back in order again, back under control, get our oil fields back, get our gas fields back, and get back all the land that has been stolen or given away to the nobility. Chase the nobility out of Scotland. We don't need them. We don't need royalty or nobles or lords or earls or any of that crap. Get rid of them. Let's have the land actually sold to local people who are going to work the land, to companies and rural companies that are going to do something sensible with it. Not the hunting, shooting and fishing aristocracy of England coming north for their jollies in August. That's it for me. I'm heading home for my tea. I've had a good rant. I'm feeling a lot better. And I'll see you all tomorrow. All right, bye-bye.